As a fellow New Yorker and a fellow City University graduate, I welcome General Powell, who really needs no introduction.
Our Vietnam veterans of America have recognized your long history of service to our country, to our veterans, your support for our new generations of young kids coming up, and our whole country, really. So we have wanted to present you with this award from our National Minority Affairs Committee and from VVA. It says, General Colin Powell, for your relentless efforts to achieve justice for our nation's veterans. It's dated October 9th, 2010, which is tomorrow.
But it's our honor and pleasure to present you with our Commendation Medal that we present to veterans who've gone above and beyond in service to their country and service to other veterans. And so this is the Vietnam Veterans of America Commendation Medal. Thank you so much.
Jerry and Mr. President, thank you so very much for these awards. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to be with you this morning. My time is somewhat compressed because I'll be leaving here and going down to the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Gates, and sharing some views with him, getting a sense of his assessment of where we are in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places in the world where our GIs are doing such wonderful work and are under such stress, kind of stress that even we as Vietnam veterans didn't experience during our time. Many people have often said that the World War II generation was the greatest generation. And every speech I give, every public speech I give, I say, you know, it was a great generation, but America has been blessed by having greatness in every single generation. And that includes the Vietnam generation, the Korean generation, and especially today's generation of young Americans who are serving so brilliantly in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we should be proud of all of them. So this means a lot to me coming from my fellow veterans. I reflect back in reality that it was, I guess, 48 years ago now that I went on my first tour to Vietnam. I've reached that age, ladies and gentlemen, where everything is 40 or 45 years. You know the feeling? Yeah. You have to start thinking in the decades and all that. But that's the way it is. And I am so appreciative of what VVA has done for our Vietnam veterans. What you've done to make sure that those who are missing are never forgotten and that we keep pushing to get a full accounting. What you have done with respect to those who are in need of health care, the Agent Orange problem, the homeless problem, the post-traumatic stress problem that our veterans have. You have been remarkable in your many years of service in making sure that Americans never forget that conflict, never forget the sacrifices that our Vietnam veterans made. But you've done more than that. You have also connected to the current generation. You know, the dinners that you give to the young GIs that are here in the Washington area or throughout the country. All that you are doing to recognize that service never ends. It doesn't end with one conflict, one war. It continues. And those of us who are veterans have an obligation not only to our fellow veterans of our conflict, but to all veterans who came before and those who come after. I'm always mindful of this. Next Saturday I will do something that I enjoy doing all the time. These are called honor flights. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
Yes,
Where these World War II veterans come in and go to that beautiful memorial. And I always drive down in my Corvette as I go every day. Hey, 73 years old, if you can still drive a Corvette, don't laugh at me. I'll go down and just spend time with them. And I did one of these about a year and a half ago. Bob Dole is almost always at one of them, or Mike Skelton, people like that. But it was a wonderful group from a town out west. And I usually speak to the group, take some pictures, and then sort of have a brief conversation with all of them there. And there was this one lady who was the widow of a World War II veteran, and she was in a wheelchair. And so I bent down and chatted with her, and she was very excited about the day. They were going to look at many monuments and memorials, but this was her husband's war, World War II. And so I knelt down next to her by a wheelchair, and we chatted for a while, and we held hands. And as I got up, I kissed her. I take every opportunity I can to kiss anybody who will let me kiss them. And so I kissed her, and she was moved. We had a wonderful moment. And then I went back home, and it was 3 days later that I found out that she got on the bus and she had an attack, and she collapsed and was clinically believed to be dead. And they took her to the hospital and they revived her. And she came back, and her family knew that she was terminal, that one day this would happen. And when she came back, and the doctors were talking to her, and the family was considering what to do next, the family said, no, she told us that the day would come and we should not do anything else. And she opened her eyes, looked around, and said, this was a memorable day for me. I remember my husband. I remember that time in our lives. I remember what it was like during World War II. And now I'm happy and at peace. And then she died. And I'll never forget that moment. So I take every opportunity I can to connect to veterans. The World War II generation is passing on. The Korean War generation is passing on. Our generation is starting to pass on. And so it's important for us to remember. It's also why I'm proud to be leader of the Honorary Leadership Committee for the Vietnam Education Center. It's going to be a marvelous education center, and I talk about it all the time. And what I say to my audience is, we don't ever want the names on that magnificent wall that gets more visitors per year than any other memorial in Washington. The names are taken off the wall, gifts are left, 100,000 gifts that are left. We have them all in the warehouse, you know this. And we want to be able to display them. But more importantly, what I say to my audience is that this education center will be underground. And when people go down into it, they'll see screens come up with pictures of the GIs whose names are on the wall. And they'll hear about their families. They'll see that these were men and women who lived and loved and gave all they can and all they could for their nation. So we don't want those engraved names on that granite wall to become unknown to future generations as just names. They were human beings, they were people. They're Americans who loved and served their nation so well. You keep that spirit alive. You're doing such a great, great job of doing it. And to receive this plaque, this recognition, as part of your diversity effort means a great deal to me as well. I'm one of those diversity people that I've referred to. And people often say to me, well, gee, when you went to West Point, what was I didn't go to West Point.
ROTC. City College.
First ROTC graduate to become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So people say, how did you become chairman if you didn't go to West Point? And I said, well, when I was coming along, I went to a public school system. Great university, the City College of New York. Were you a CCNY or?
Queens College.
Yeah. But I say to folks, it's a great public institution. Queens, City, Brooklyn, all of the colleges are now part of the City University of New York. Mine is CCNY in Harlem. And I said, I got a great public school education from kindergarten all the way through college. And my parents, immigrants, did not pay a nickel for my education. Not a nickel. Because the citizens of New York City and New York State felt it was so important for the future of the city and the state that they educate the kids. The responsibility of the government, not the responsibility of private schools, but the responsibility of the government to have a great public school system. And that's what I came up with. Now, I didn't take great advantage of it because I was not a great student. In high school, couldn't get into the better high schools. I went to Morris High School. It was a school in the Bronx where if you couldn't get in anywhere else, you had to be let in there. And then I somehow got into City College of New York. 4.5 years later, I had dropped majors repeatedly. I was in occasional trouble with the administration at the City College of New York. And then finally, after 4.5 years, they figured enough was enough. He had 4 straight years of straight A's in ROTC. Let's count that into his grade point average. That brings him up to 2.0. And so they sent me to the Army with best wishes and hopes that I would never return. Now I'm considered one of the greatest sons the city college has ever had. And so I tell them, they named a center after me, the Colin Powell Center for Policy Studies, and we're getting ready to put up a new building. The reason I tell this story is because I tell it to school kids all over. It isn't where you start that counts, it's where you end up and what you do along the way. Do you perform? Do you do your very best? And for a young kid born in Harlem, raised in the South Bronx, two immigrant parents who weren't very well educated, blue-collar workers in the garment industry, to be able to rise in our country the way I was able to rise on the basis of working as hard as I could is a magnificent story about America. If I had come in the Army 5 or 8 years earlier, it wouldn't have happened because we were just starting to come out of the segregated period. And diversity now had become an important thing in the Army in 1958 when I joined. And what they essentially said to me, don't tell us any hard luck stories about your immigrant parents. We don't care where you were born in Harlem. And don't give us any hard luck stories about the South Bronx or the fact that you're black. The only thing we care about is performance, and you're now green. And so we're giving you the opportunity to perform. Perform, you're fine. You don't perform, you're gone. Simple as that. That was easy to understand. We were still a segregated country. The Army wasn't segregated. The military has always been in the lead in our country in pushing for diversity, in reaching out and saying that every single human being in this country has value. And it is our responsibility as a society and a nation to recognize that value. And I'm very pleased at what the diversity folks are doing here to recognize the contribution of Native Americans, of our Asian Americans, of our African Americans, of our Latino Americans. All of them have the opportunity to serve the country and should grab that opportunity. And things like the DREAM Act, I'm very, very supportive of. If we can get a youngster with a high school education who's willing to serve in the armed forces for 2 years, why should we not make this person a citizen who's willing to make that kind of contribution to the nation or to get 2 years of college? And the other thing that connects to your initiative, what makes your initiative on diversity so important, is that in one more generation, another 20 or 30 years, the minorities of America will be the majority of America. We are the only country in the world who can have such a situation and deal with it. Because that's been our tradition. It's what we've always been. We all are immigrants in one way or another. In Europe, they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to integrate their minorities, those who are coming, their immigrants who are coming to their nation. We know how to do it. But there has been a trend in America lately to sort of say, no, this is not good. We want to keep you out. We want to kind of go back to the old days. Your diversity initiative helps the country work their way through this by saying everybody is valuable, everybody is important. So let's keep the doors of America open. And let's make sure we treat our fellow Americans who are already here, who have served. Let's make sure that they get the benefits they're entitled to. But more importantly, let's make sure we open new doors for them. It is the way this country will continue to thrive. It's the way this country will continue to move ahead. Everybody says, well, we're no longer a superpower. Well, that doesn't trouble me. There are lots of parts of the world now that can be called powerful parts. China, Brazil, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, good. Let's all now compete in the world of economics and in the world of social progress. And let's make sure we still have the strongest military on the face of the earth. But this is the time to recognize the world has changed. The enemies that we had when we were in the service and when I was in my military career, those enemies are different. They're gone. Let's not go looking for new enemies. Let's deal with the ones we have right now. And let's concentrate on building a better, safer world. And America will continue to be that leader of the world that wants to be free. I can assure you that. People say, well, our standing has dropped so much. I said, well, it dropped a little, but we're going to get it back. I'm going to tell you something. Tomorrow morning, at every embassy that I was responsible for, at every consular office that I had around the world as Secretary of State, every morning, there was a line of people. And when each of them got to the window, they all said the same thing. I want to go to America. They didn't want to go anywhere else. There's no other embassy with a line in front of it. It was ours. So we are still that powerful draw, that powerful magnet that pulls in people. You know, send me your tired, you're poor, you're wretched masses, yearning to breathe free. That's who we are. We must never forget that. the diversity initiative makes sure that you understand that. It is our obligation to take care of every human being that we have been blessed to have as a citizen of this country, or we want to be a citizen of this country. That's how my parents were welcomed here 90 years ago. We have to remain that open, welcoming, diverse society. I thank you for this, and I hope you have a great conference. Thank you very much.